Welcome back to Reading Bear. Today, we will take a look at some new malicious compliance stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
The first one is titled, "TOWS Resident. Make the drop of shame and lose your contract." This is a short story about being a good neighbor, an HOA that actually isn't evil, and a towing company that is. This literally just concluded moments ago. I live in like a little gated community thing with townhomes and stuff and a HOA, nothing super fancy by any means, just a quiet little neighborhood. The way it works with parking and the crux of this story is that every resident has 2 spots assigned to their unit, and they're yours to do with as you see fit. Use them, leave them empty, let your neighbor use it, let guests use it, park straddling both spots, who cares? They're yours. It's been this way for many years with nary an issue. We have a towing company contracted to the HOA. Now, our tow company is only here to be called at a residence or HOA direct request to remove an unauthorized vehicle from their spot. The parking is numbered, but just to identify the spots saved for residents, everyone gets 2, as we don't have any numbered, assigned window stickers or anything that's serious. The towing contract is rarely used, and really even then just as a last resort, we usually just talk to each other like good neighbors do if we have a parking or other issue. So I get home this evening and right behind me comes a tow truck. The kind they use for stealth pulls where they lift up one axle and roll you on down the road about 20 seconds after arrival. As I get out of my car, I see them pulling a neighbor's car who always parks diagonally in their 2 spots, due to a tight configuration and a corner spot, making it difficult to navigate even small cars in and out while parking within the lines. Now again, it's their spots, so who cares? Literally nobody, that's who. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. You see, the couple that owns the car is a sweet little couple in their 60s, semi-retired and generally just nice, quiet people. It didn't seem likely to me that their car was being repossessed, and something about the tow truck driver and his either spotter or manager, some random dude in a F-150 following him around on a radio, just made me feel odd. Usually I'm a pretty non-confrontational person, but something about the whole situation made me act in an uncharacteristically assertive manner, and so I flagged down the driver as he was beginning to leave with the resident's car. I'll be G, he'll be TT for tow truck. Gee, hey, are you pulling a repo, or a resident out of their own spot? TT, I'm pulling a resident for parking in 2 spots. Gee, that's bullshit, I've lived here a decade and that's never been a thing. TT, yeah well it's in the contract, you should try reading it. Gee, no, I've literally talked to the HOA about exactly this and they have confirmed what you're towing them for is explicitly not a towable thing unless the resident themselves called it in, and I doubt they asked you to tow their own car. TT, well you should talk to them then, because I'm leaving with it. Gee, cool, see you in an hour. So in comes the malicious compliance. In a stroke of righteous karma, the HOA rep who is responsible for the tow company contract of our complex got home less than 5 minutes after the tow truck left, and I was out walking my dogs. I walked up to him, exchanged the usual pleasantries, and relayed the situation as well as the fact that they had tagged at least 3 other vehicles in the immediate vicinity for future tows. He simply let out an exasperated, "Ugh, shit," and said he would get on it. I then knocked on the neighbor's door whose car got towed and informed them of the situation as it stood, suggesting they also contact the HOA rep up the hill. They did so accordingly, and he confirmed that he was already in the process of handling it. We stood out front and chatted for a bit, and he went inside. I retreated to my front porch and waited for what I knew was coming. 20 minutes later, as I leaned against the wall out front, I hear the jingle-jangle of victory coming back into the complex. The tow truck drops the car diagonally in both spots, just as he found it, with a scowl on his face. As he leaves, we make eye contact. I grin. He gives me the finger as he leaves. I smile because he knows I won. The neighbor whose car was again parked came outside shortly thereafter, and we chatted again briefly. The HOA rep, whose swift action ensured their car was back in the spot exactly 1 hour from the time it was towed, came down to where we were chatting and apologized for the issue, saying that the towing company has given them other problems recently and that with this he would be moving at next month's board meeting to contract with a new company as of January 1st. One that actually abides by what we pay them to do, which definitely isn't towing ourselves. In closing, be the good neighbor Mr. Rogers taught you to be. The next one is titled, Light Said Go, so I went. So, I thought I'd share a story about something that happened to me today, in real life, that is totally true and you can't question it. What? I'm not being sarcastic, this is just the way I talk. It was pouring rain today, resulting in a mad dash from the parking garage to my office building. Normally this wouldn't be such a big deal as it's only a building away, so I wouldn't get too wet, but there were two problems. 1. There was construction in the area resulting in mud pretty much everywhere. 2. My building was across the street. So I'm making my way to the intersection as quickly as I can, thinking hey, I might not get too wet in all this rain. Plus, the light just turned green in my favor. What luck. But just as I arrive at the curb, a big stretch limo pulls up, one of those newer ones that kinda looks like a Humvee in the front. It goes over the line, blocking the intersection and nearly running a few people down, and hits the puddle hard. Yeah. I got soaked. But remember that construction I mentioned? I wasn't just soaked. I was literally coated in thick mud. I pause in pure shock. Did that really just happen? Reminder, yes, it really did. Seriously, I'm not just making this up. Why would anyone do that? You're just walking crazy. Pulls. What the hell? The passenger window rolls down and this fat guy with a little mustache leans out, laughing his butt off at me and waving his stinking cigar in my direction. Haw 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 haw, you look like a pig in mud. Dude. I can't go to work like this, I yelled. Shut up. Light's still green, just go. Oh, just go? Fine. I'll go. The light is green after all. So I opened his door, which almost caused him to tumble out, and climbed into his limo, dropping huge clods of mud on him, on the door, the seat, and the floor as I climbed through. Just as I was about to get out the opposite door, I turned to look at his shocked, outraged, mud-covered expression. I reached into my pocket, popped a Mentos, and grinned. I think something about that got through to him because he kinda smiled a knowing smile at that point. When I got out the other side of the limo, everybody clapped. A cop saw what happened and wrote the guy a ticket. My boss saw it too and I got a big promotion. The next one is titled, You Won't Give Me a Form to Save Everyone's Time? Fine, I'll waste more of yours. Post offices in Canada are maddening places to visit, a kind of time warp bubble where even the simplest of actions, like sending a letter, can take 3 to 4 more steps than necessary. The people working in them seem pleasant enough, but God help you if you want to drop in and quickly send a package. My MC takes place in one such small town post office where 2 employees work, post office guy and post office lady. I have a small business and my customers will sometimes request priority 2-day express shipping to the USA. This is a very expensive service that has 2 large customs forms that take about 10 minutes to fill out. You have to press hard with your pen so it goes through all 6 carbon copies. In the past, I've requested these forms to take home where I can fill them out ahead of time, so when I get to the counter my parcel is ready to go and can be processed quickly. Nice and efficient. However, after my last shipment, post office guy refused to give me new forms to take home. When I asked him why, I was told, it's our policy not to give out forms ahead of time. I replied that I've received them before and it saves everyone a lot of time, to which he replied, next time you're in, talk to post office lady, it's her policy. I was then told to leave the line, go fill out my forms, and come through the line again. The next time I shipped a 2-day express parcel I went through the line, and this time I was greeted by post office lady, and she began to enter my package. She measures it all up, weighs it, and enters it all into her computer. Then she asks me how I want to send it, to which I replied, 2-day priority, please. She proceeded to sigh, turn around, retrieve my customs forms, hand them to me, and then tells me to go to the side counter and fill these out and come back. Afterwards I asked her if I could please get extra copies of the form, to which she replied that they can't give those forms out ahead of time. When I asked why, she just glared at me and said, it's our policy. My small and petty act of malicious compliance is that from now on every time I have a priority 2-day parcel, I intentionally and patiently wait for her to measure it, weigh it, enter it into her system, and ask me how I would like to ship the package before putting on my biggest shit-eating grin and declaring, priority 2-day please. She rolls her eyes, gets me the forms, sends me to my paperwork corner, and then has to delete all the data she just entered into her computer before she can help the next customer. Today was especially delicious. I had 2 packages, one to be sent via regular mail, the second via 2-day priority. I of course put down the regular mail package first, let her enter it all into her system, she even printed the label, then let her go through entering the second package, only to gleefully declare, 2-day priority please, and watch her have to undo all the work she just did and get me my forms. It's petty, it wastes everyone's time, but somehow it makes visiting the post office just a little bit more enjoyable. Edit, I tried the online forms. They work for every other shipping method, except priority 2-day. If I'm shipping via any other method I always fill out my forms online ahead of time. I'm not a complete jerk, but they won't work with priority. So dumb. The next one is titled, You Want Me to Drive a 34-ton mixer over a sand dune? Sign here, please. Concrete mixers are unwieldy, top-heavy and spend a lot of time driving off-road with a shifting load. Consequently, we tend to try to pay a lot of attention to what we are driving on and where the customer wants us to go. What the customer wants and what we are physically able to do don't always meet. The job site I am working is down near the Salton Sea. For those unfamiliar with Southern California history and geography, the Salton Sea is what happens when a man from Flint, Michigan hires a Canadian shipwright to dig a 60-mile irrigation canal, then digs a couple illegal bypass channels right before one of the worst flood in the recorded history of the Colorado River. It has no outlet, and it currently a fetid lake of salt, stink and tilapia. The customer, who we will call Paulie, is building 3 greenhouses on sandy ground. The job mainly consists of pouring post holes for the steel supports. It's slow work that isn't helped by being next to the bog of eternal stench, in one of the hottest and most humid parts of the state. The lot is clearly blow sand, the really fine stuff that gets carried by the wind. It's been graded smooth, but not compacted at all. Basically, the lot is a sand dune with pretensions of civilization, and even the balloon tires on the tractors are digging in. I'm not taking my pig of a truck anywhere near that sand, at least not unless I wind up in a really foul mood. Luckily, the subcontractor is not stupid. He looks at the situation and decides to have me pour into the skip loader from the road. He knows we can't move my truck across that sand, so he's been having the loader ferry the concrete from my truck to the holes. It means that his crew has to shovel the concrete out by hand, and after the first couple loads, they are going to look like the Chain Gang from Cool Hand Luke without the benefit of Joy Harmon, but since the owner didn't want to spring for a pump, it is the best option available. Paulie doesn't show up until a couple days into the job. When I pull up with my load, he tells me that what we've been doing is taking too long. He's got a different plan, a better plan. He wants me to back out over the dirt to pour the holes directly, because clearly that thought never occurred to us. When I try to explain that the ground is too soft, he points at the tire tracks through the sand and say, the last truck made it just fine. This is a lie. Not only that, it is an obvious lie. The last truck made it is one of the more common lies people tell drivers, right up there with, we can refill your tank with the water truck. They are practically memes, similar to the jokes about inspectors being the enemy, just without the humor or benign intent. It's the difference between Al Bundy and Ted Bundy. I know I am being lied to, and what's worse, I'm being lied to incompetently. For starters, the tire tracks Paulie's pointing at were clearly made by the loader, not a truck. Also, I was the last truck. The way the job has been going, they've had one truck come out, pour the load, then go back for the next one while the crew sets and aligns the posts in the holes. Paulie doesn't know this because he got there while I was off getting the next load. In fact, since this is his first time out here since we started, he has no clue that I am the only driver that has been on this job since it started. This is one of those areas that don't bother with foppish fripperies, like street signs or addresses. On top of that, this job is on a flag lot, so it has a very narrow street facing. I was on the job the first day, and since, after that, I knew where it was, and he knew I wouldn't say no, my manager, Bob, asked me to do it on subsequent days, so he wouldn't have to deal with lost drivers. So Paulie is a bad liar and I am now in a really foul mood. With my most obsequious smile, I say, oh, well in that case, of course. I just need you to sign the ticket before I can pull onto the property. On my way back to the cab, I call Bob to see what else we have going that day. There isn't much other work, so Bob asks what's going on. I explain the situation, and Bob just asks one question, did he sign the ticket? When I say yes, he tells me to be careful and call him if we need a wrecker. If you ever order concrete yourself, and the driver refuses to pour without you signing the ticket first, think long and hard about what you just asked him to do. The ticket includes a damage waiver and acknowledges receipt of the concrete. Some drivers may have you sign it as a matter of course, though I've never met one, and most of the guys I know don't even get signatures after the job. For the most part, however, it should be viewed as a giant red flag that the driver think there is some kind of liability in play. It could be something as simple as backing up a curb, which could crack, or front yard with ever so crushable irrigation pipes and septic tanks. It could also mean that you've really talked off the driver, and he's about to nail you on standby time. You have a limited amount of time to unload before the accounting trolls start charging you $1 or $2 every minute. Your best bet is to ask him if there is something to be concerned about. Technically you could refuse to sign, but by that point it's a Hobson's choice, and if there is nothing wrong with the load, you are paying for it either way. If we were busy, I would have slowly backed up until my truck started to bog down, then pulled forward and refused to go any further. We aren't busy. When I bog down, I just pull forward and try again. Each time I get a little further back, but it is very slow going. Paulie is getting upset. After half a dozen attempts, Paulie starts waving me back furiously and shouts, "Step on it. Just get on top of it." Apparently Paulie thinks I'm on a boat. But, in the world of malicious compliance, the customer is always right. I pull forward as far as I can, floor it in reverse, and right before I hit the sand, I flip the selector up and stick it into high range. A manual truck transmission is laid out in a standard H pattern, but each position covers 2 or 3 gears. There are selector switches to choose which sets of gears you are using. For instance, on an 8-speed, low range is 1 to 4, high range is 5 to 8. While high-range reverse is a usable gear, you will almost never see a driver using it. Even the manufacturers recommend against attempting it. It's a fiddly gear that is easy to break if you hit it with too much power, and you rarely need to go anywhere near that fast in reverse. My truck leaps onto that sand like a corpulent gazelle, huffing and wheezing across the veldt. It doesn't last long. I've barely made it a truck length before I have to go back down to low range. Not long after that, my wheels start slinging dirt, the tires sink in, and the truck starts bouncing from the effort. That's the signal to stop and check my work. Paulie is, of course, not happy with this. My truck is nowhere near close enough. He looks at me, and to my complete and utter lack of surprise asks, "What happened?" I tell him that I appear to be stuck. He asks if I can pull forward and try again. I look at my tires. The truck is buried to the axles, and it weighs as much as 13 pickup trucks, or 40 smart cars. Nothing short of divine intervention is moving the truck while it is still full. So I smile and say, "I'll give it a shot." On the side of my stick is a little knob for something called deep reduction. You set that knob and put it into low, and that engine turns into the god of torque. For you gear heads out there, the ratio is somewhere around 27 to 1. It's practically impossible to stall the engine in that gear without running into an immovable object. Even then, you are just as likely to snap your axle or tear out the drivetrain, while the engine hums merrily along. And, of course, if you are on soft, loose sand, it will just kick a gloriously wicked rooster tail all over anything, or anyone, behind you. Paulie is still spitting dirt when I get out to give him the bad news. Looks like we are going to have to keep using the loader, like we were. Then once we've finished with that, he can use it to help pull my truck out of the dirt. In the end, we had the loader pulling on my tow hook, and an excavator pushing on the Mansfield bar. Not only did it waste half an hour of the precious time he was trying to save, but he had to pay around $50 worth of standby. Of course it could have been worse. If I'd been truly stuck, he would have been on the hook for the wrecker. The last one is titled, "Smelly Creepy Boss Gets What's Coming." This was about 5 years ago when I, 21 at the time, was working at a major bank in a position that had me making calls and verifying credit card activity. We were expected to make 8 calls per hour, assuming most calls will probably go to voicemail. It was mindless and I was almost always stoned, but still ended up being a high performer and making easily 11 to 12 calls per hour. My boss, let's call him Cole, loved me. He started having me train newcomers and brought me to lunch with some up-and-coming managers. This was a big deal to my career, so when he started flirting with me I mostly brushed it off and went on with my day, creating new materials, helping colleagues with random questions, and still making a huge amount of calls. Cole and I were both being recognized for the team's efforts. Then, he brought me to his office, which stinks. It's not a smell I've ever smelled before and haven't since, but needless to say, it's a smelly smell that smells smelly. like an old pair of wet socks that were wrung out onto the carpet. On this particular stinky day, Cole asks me to close the door behind him and gives me this smile that still gives me chills. He starts to unbutton his shirt saying it's hot in there. Oh, isn't it hot? You should get undressed too. I stormed out. Hell no, was I dealing with that. I went through a bit of a depression and immediately looked for other jobs, contributing less and less every day until I wasn't speaking to any colleagues except the dope ones who knew what was happening. Here's where MC comes in. Every hour I would spend 20 to 40 minutes making 8 calls, and then turning off my computer and started playing crosswords, or drawing pictures, or using my phone in the bathroom until the hour was up. Cole noticed very quickly that I was doing the absolute bare minimum and called me into a meeting. I willed myself to go without calling HR, and he was threatening to write me up for my bad moods and not working hard enough. I looked him dead in the eyes and asked if he thought it was hot in here. And he immediately starts bursting into excuses, oh you're misinterpreting things, and the like. I told him I wasn't misinterpreting anything, and he snaps back that I am losing out on an excellent opportunity. I pull out my phone and stop recording. Thank him for his time, see the red fall out of his face, and then continue on what I'm doing for the next month while I found a new job in the company. From what I know, he quit shortly thereafter and doesn't have a Facebook or LinkedIn to show where he is currently. I have no plans to release the recording but still have it just in case. Thanks for listening.